Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Little Rock, Arkansas. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the autumn of 1840, when Little Rock was still a growing frontier town along the Arkansas River, a series of events began that would remain buried in obscure county records for over a century. The story centers around the Maro plantation, located approximately 5 miles east of what is now downtown Little Rock, and a man named Solomon Graves, whose existence was nearly erased from historical record. The first unusual detail was recorded by Reverend William Stevenson in his parish registry on October 12, 1840. The entry simply noted, "Called to Maro Estate, unusual circumstances, no burial performed." This brief notation might have gone unnoticed, except for what followed in the subsequent weeks. According to tax records from that year, the Maro plantation, once among the most productive in Pulaski County, suddenly reported a significant decrease in production. By December of that same year, the property was listed as temporarily non-operational. What makes this case particularly disturbing is not what was documented, but rather what was deliberately omitted from official records. The Maro family, led by plantation owner Bernard Maro and his wife Charlotte, were known figures in Little Rock society. Their 23-year-old daughter Adeline was mentioned frequently in society pages of the Arkansas Gazette through the summer of 1840. After September of that year, her name vanishes from all public records. Similarly, county employment records show that Solomon Graves, a free black man who worked as a skilled carpenter, disappears from tax rolls and census data after August 1840. The Arkansas Historical Society archives contain a leather-bound journal discovered during a courthouse renovation in 1963 that belonged to Dr. James Woodson, Little Rock's primary physician during that period. His entry from September 28, 1840, reads, "Called to Maro plantation regarding female patient. Condition beyond medical intervention. Master insists condition resulted from fall down stairs. Evidence suggests otherwise. No further action taken as per custom with such matters." The Maro plantation stood on what is now the eastern outskirts of Little Rock, where Forsh Creek meets the Arkansas River. The main house was described in architectural surveys as a grand 2-story structure with 12 rooms, unusual for Arkansas territory at that time. According to property maps from 1838, the estate included the main house, a separate kitchen building, stables, and 2 rows of cabins that housed approximately 40 enslaved people who worked the cotton fields. Before the events of 1840, Bernard Maro was known as one of the more progressive plantation owners in the region. County records indicate he allowed some of the enslaved people to learn trades and occasionally hire out their labor in Little Rock. This practice was controversial among other plantation owners, as documented in minutes from town meetings, where Maro defended his economic approach. It was through this system that Solomon Graves, though legally enslaved, functioned with some degree of autonomy as a skilled carpenter who could read and write. Charlotte Maro, according to accounts in the papers of Elizabeth Trapnell, wife of a prominent Little Rock merchant, was a woman of delicate constitution but iron will. Mrs. Trapnell's letters to her sister in Virginia mention Charlotte's reputation for maintaining strict discipline among the household staff, while presenting a perfect facade of Southern gentility to Little Rock society. Their daughter Adeline was educated in Philadelphia and returned to Little Rock in 1838. The Arkansas Gazette's society pages described her as the jewel of Little Rock society and a young woman of considerable intellectual accomplishment and refined artistic sensibility. Her return coincided with the arrival of several pieces of furniture and architectural elements for the ongoing expansion of the Maro home. According to inventory records, Bernard Maro commissioned extensive woodwork for the East Wing addition to the main house. Receipts found in the county clerk's records indicate that Solomon Graves was responsible for crafting much of this woodwork, including an elaborately carved staircase that was the centerpiece of the expanded home. What transpired on the Maro plantation in the late summer of 1840 remains largely undocumented in official records. However, a series of letters discovered in 1957 during the demolition of an old post office building provides some insight. These letters, written by Harriet Parker, a distant cousin of Charlotte Maro, who visited the plantation that summer, were never sent. They were found sealed in a tin box within a wall cavity. In one letter dated August 3, 1840, Harriet wrote, "Something unusual is developing at Maro Plantation. Adeline spends hours in the new East Wing, supposedly overseeing the final details of the woodwork. Charlotte has mentioned the carpenter, Solomon, with increasing frequency and evident displeasure. Bernard seems oblivious, concerned only with the cotton yield predictions." A subsequent letter, dated August 17th, states, "The atmosphere in this house grows heavier by the day. I observed Adeline in conversation with the carpenter on 3 occasions this week. Their exchanges, while seemingly about the woodwork details, carried undertones that Charlotte clearly perceived as well. Last night voices were raised after dinner. Bernard's study door remained closed for hours afterward." The final letter, dated September 2nd, reads only, "I am leaving tomorrow. What I witnessed this evening near the old oak by the creek cannot be put to paper. Charlotte's face when she returned to the house will haunt me forever. I told her what I saw was surely a misunderstanding, but her eyes showed she believed otherwise. I fear what may follow. What happened in the weeks that followed can only be pieced together through fragmented sources. The ledger of Simeon Johnson, who operated the ferry across the Arkansas River, notes on September 25th. Unusual movement from Maro Plantation after midnight. Wagon with covered cargo. No questions asked as per Mr. Maro's standing instructions. Dr. Woodson's journal entry from September 28th, previously mentioned, suggests some kind of physical trauma occurred. A subsequent entry on October 4th states only, "Maro matter concluded, informed by Sheriff Davis that no further medical documentation required." The most disturbing evidence comes from a source discovered much later. In 1952, during excavation for a new county administrative building, workers uncovered a small metal box buried approximately 6 feet deep. Inside was a folded piece of parchment containing what appeared to be a letter written in a careful, educated hand. The Arkansas State Archives authenticated the document as dating from the 1840s, though the exact date is unclear. The letter begins without salutation. If this account is found, know that injustice has been buried alongside truth. I, Solomon Graves, being of sound mind but desperate circumstance, hereby attest to the events that have transpired at Maro Plantation. Miss Adeline and I have committed no sin before God, though man's law would condemn our association. We spoke only of books, of ideas, of a world different from this one. When discovered in conversation by Mrs. Maro near the creekside oak, the fury unleashed was immediate. I am held now in the root cellar, awaiting whatever fate awaits me. Miss Adeline has been confined to her room for 3 days. The shouting from the main house suggests her condition deteriorates. I write this in haste as Mr. Carpenter, who brings me water, has agreed to conceal this testimony somewhere it might eventually be found. May God have mercy where man has shown none. The letter ends abruptly. No signature is present, suggesting it was interrupted or that the final portion was lost. What happened to Solomon Graves remains unrecorded in any official capacity. No death certificate, burial record, or sale documentation exists. Similarly, Adeline Maro's fate is equally obscured. The most telling piece of evidence comes from the Arkansas Gazette, dated November 5, 1840, which includes a small notice. The Maro family announces with regret that Miss Adeline Maro has been sent to reside with relatives in France due to health concerns exacerbated by the Arkansas climate. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. No passenger manifests from New Orleans to France list Adeline Maro as a passenger in 1840 or 1841. No correspondence from France referring to her arrival exists in the Maro family papers that were donated to the Arkansas Historical Society in 1912 by Bernard Moreau's grandnephew. The story might have remained completely buried were it not for the work of Professor Sarah Caldwell of the University of Arkansas. In 1968, while researching antebellum architecture, she became interested in the distinctive woodwork that had been salvaged from the Maro plantation before its demolition in 1921. Several pieces, including portions of a staircase and wall panels, had been preserved in the Arkansas State Museum's collection. Professor Caldwell's examination of these architectural elements revealed something unusual. Hidden within the elaborate carvings of the stair banister were small, almost imperceptible symbols and letters. When documented and analyzed, they appeared to be a form of coded communication. Among the repeating motifs were the initials S and A, intertwined in such a way that casual observation would see only decorative flourishes. Most significantly, on the underside of one stair tread, carefully carved where it would remain invisible except during removal or repair, was an inscription: "Two souls bound by mind, separated by circumstance. S.G. for A.M. Summer, 1840. The Maro plantation site itself revealed one final piece of evidence when the property was surveyed for commercial development in 1965. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an anomaly near where the east wing of the house once stood. Limited archaeological excavation uncovered a small, unmarked grave containing human remains. The burial, according to the archaeological report, appeared hurried and irregular. The skeleton showed evidence of trauma to the skull and neck vertebrae. Carbon dating placed the burial between 1840 and 1845. No definitive identification was ever made, as DNA testing was not available at that time. The remains were reinterred in the Little Rock Cemetery with a simple marker reading, "Unknown, circa 1840. The case file was closed in 1968, with the official conclusion listing the remains as likely those of an unidentified plantation worker. Bernard Maro continued to operate his plantation until his death in 1862 during the Civil War. Charlotte Maro survived him by 12 years, eventually moving to Memphis to live with her sister. Neither ever spoke publicly about their daughter or the events of 1840, according to any surviving records. The Maro plantation changed hands several times after the Civil War. By the turn of the century, the once grand house had fallen into disrepair. Those who lived in the area developed a reputation for avoiding the property, particularly the area where the East Wing once stood. Local accounts collected by folklorists in the 1930s refer to uneasy feelings and sounds of distress around the old foundation stones. One account, recorded from an elderly man named William Jefferson, who had worked on neighboring land as a young man in the 1880s, stated, "That old Maro place wasn't right, especially when you'd work near where that fancy east part used to be, like somebody watching. Sometimes sounded like wood creaking, like somebody on them stairs that wasn't there no more. White folks said it was just old stories, but anybody who worked that land knew better. Something happened there that the earth don't forget." In 1919, a developer purchased the land with plans to subdivide it for housing. During the initial clearing, workers reportedly refused to continue after finding what they described as unusual markings carved into the few remaining foundation stones of the east wing. The developer eventually abandoned the project, citing financial concerns rather than worker superstitions. The land remained undeveloped until 1950, when it was purchased for industrial use. The warehouse built on the site experienced unusually high turnover among night security staff through the 1950s. Incident reports frequently mentioned unexplained noises and cold spots near the northeast corner of the building. The warehouse was eventually demolished in 1968 after a fire of undetermined origin. Today, the land where the Maro plantation once stood is occupied by a commercial distribution center. Employees occasionally report unusual experiences in certain areas of the building, particularly near where the east wing of the original house would have been located. Management attributes these stories to normal building noises and the power of suggestion. The full truth of what happened between Solomon Graves and Adeline Maro in the summer of 1840 will never be known with certainty. What evidence exists suggests a connection between an enslaved craftsman and the daughter of his enslaver that transgressed the strict social boundaries of the time. Whether their relationship was romantic or intellectual in nature remains speculative, though Solomon's hidden message in the staircase suggests deep emotional attachment. What is clear is that whatever transpired resulted in the disappearance of both individuals from historical record, with evidence suggesting at least one violent death and careful concealment by the Maro family. The story represents one of countless lost histories from America's troubled past, where lives could be erased and truths buried by those with the power and privilege to control the narrative. In 2008, a small memorial plaque was placed in Little Rock's Riverfront Park, reading, "In memory of those whose stories were silenced, their truths may be unearthed by time." Though not specifically referencing Solomon Graves and Adeline Maro, local historians consider it a subtle acknowledgement of their story and others like it. The most haunting aspect of this case may be how easily the truth was nearly lost to history. Were it not for a hidden letter, concealed carvings, and the persistent work of researchers over a century later, the events at Maro Plantation would have remained completely buried, like so many other stories from that dark period of American history. Those who visit the site today report no supernatural occurrences. There are no ghosts that walk the grounds where the Maro plantation once stood. The true horror lies not in spectral manifestations, but in the very human capacity for cruelty, the silencing of voices, and the burying of truths that contradict the preferred narratives of those in power. As one researcher noted in the final paragraph of her 1968 report on the case, the most disturbing aspect of the Graves-Maro mystery is not what we know happened, but rather how effectively the truth was hidden by those with the means to do so. One wonders how many similar stories remain buried, their participants forgotten, their injustices unacknowledged. The records related to this case were archived and largely forgotten until 1952. The Arkansas Historical Society maintains a small collection of the evidence, including photographs of Solomon's woodwork and a transcript of his incomplete letter. Few request to see these materials, fewer still know the story they tell. Perhaps somewhere in an archive yet to be fully examined, or beneath soil yet to be turned, more evidence waits to be discovered. Until then, the whispered story of Solomon Graves and Adeline Maro serves as a reminder that history is often written by those who survive to tell it, while the voices of others are silenced, sometimes forever. A final, Disturbing footnote to this story emerged in 1963 when an elderly woman named Margaret Wilson contacted the Arkansas Historical Society claiming to possess a family Bible belonging to her grandmother. Within its pages was a pressed flower and a handwritten note dated October 1840 that read simply, "A sends this from her new room. The air is cool here. The door is always locked." When researchers arranged to meet with Mrs. Wilson to examine this potential evidence, they discovered she had passed away suddenly. The family Bible was never found among her possessions, and so the mystery remains, echoing through time like footsteps on a staircase that no longer exists. In 1965, Dr. Thomas Bennett, a history professor specializing in antebellum Arkansas, received an unusual package from a former student. The student, while clearing out his recently deceased grandmother's attic in Memphis, had discovered a small wooden box with the initials CM carved into its lid. Inside was a collection of personal items, a tarnished silver hairbrush, several faded ribbons, and a small leather-bound journal. The journal belonged to Charlotte Maro. Dr. Bennett's subsequent paper, published in a limited circulation academic journal in 1967, revealed that Charlotte Maro's private writings provided a disturbing counterpoint to the public records. The journal, covering August through December of 1840, contained entries that shed new light on the events at the Maro plantation. An entry from August 25th reads, "I have observed A with that man again today. Their conversation appeared innocent enough, discussions of the woodwork patterns, but there is something in her eyes when she speaks with him that disturbs me greatly. Bernard refuses to acknowledge my concerns, insisting I am imagining impropriety where none exists. He values the man's craftsmanship too highly to consider my observations." By early September, Charlotte's entries grow increasingly agitated. A was not at breakfast again today. When I went to her room, her bed was undisturbed. I found her in the east wing, examining the new staircase banister with him. They stood too close. Their hands touched as she traced the pattern of his carving. When they saw me, they moved apart with such guilty haste that no explanation could satisfy. I have instructed Esther to inform me immediately if A leaves her room after dark. The entry from September 23rd contains the most revealing and disturbing passage. What happened tonight cannot be undone. When A did not appear for dinner, I went to search for her. The house was empty. A lantern was moving near the old oak by the creek. I followed. What I witnessed there between my daughter and that man has seared itself into my mind. I returned to the house and informed Bernard. His rage was terrifying. He summoned Thomas and William from the stables. They went out with rope and clubs. They returned with him an hour later. A was brought back separately. She fought like one possessed. She screams still from the room where we have confined her. Bernard says we must wait until she is calmer before determining our course of action. The man is secured below. Bernard has sent word to Dr. Woodson regarding A's nervous condition. The final entry pertaining to the matter, dated October 1st, is brief. It is done. A understands now that she must accept our decision. The story of her departure for France has been arranged. She will be taken to the place we have prepared tomorrow. Dr. Woodson has provided medication to ease her transit. As for the other matter, Bernard handled it personally last night. The ferry was used. The river keeps secrets better than men. Dr. Bennett noted in his paper that the remaining journal entries make no further explicit mention of either Adeline or Solomon. Charlotte's writing becomes increasingly fragmented over the following months, with references to hearing movement in the East Wing and A's voice calling from empty rooms. By December, she writes of taking increasing amounts of laudanum to sleep. The Bennett paper caused a minor stir in academic circles, but was never widely publicized. The Maro family descendants, still influential in Arkansas society, reportedly pressured the university to limit distribution of the findings. Dr. Bennett was denied tenure the following year and eventually relocated to a university in the Pacific Northwest, where he discontinued his research into the Maro case. The place prepared for Adeline, referenced in Charlotte's journal, remained a mystery until 1972, when renovation work at the former Arkansas State Asylum revealed architectural plans dating to 1840. These plans showed the addition of a private room in the asylum's north wing, commissioned and paid for by Bernard Maro. Admission records from October 2nd, 1840, list a new patient identified only as A.M., with the notation melancholia and moral derangement, treatment, isolation and quiet. Monthly payment records show that Bernard Maro provided substantial funds for this patient's special care until his death in 1862. After his passing, Charlotte continued the payments until her own death in 1874. The patient records end abruptly in April 1875 with a single line: "Patient A.M. deceased, no family to notify, interred in asylum grounds per standing arrangement." The asylum grounds were converted to a public park in 1911. No markers or records of the burial locations were preserved. The north wing, where A.M. was reportedly housed, was destroyed by fire in 1893, with the loss of 15 patients and 2 staff members. Newspaper accounts of the time note that the fire originated in a private room in the north corridor and spread rapidly through the aging wooden structure. In 1978, construction workers laying pipe across the former asylum grounds discovered human remains approximately 3 feet below the surface. Archaeological assessment identified the remains as belonging to a female, approximately 50 to 60 years of age. Among the few personal effects found with the burial was a small wooden carving of intertwined initials, S and A. The carving showed significant wear, suggesting it had been handled frequently over many years. The Arkansas State Forensic Anthropologist's report noted unusual features of the burial. The deceased appears to have been interred while restrained. Evidence of iron manacles remains on both wrists and ankles. Such restraint in burial is unprecedented in our records of asylum practices, suggesting punitive measures extending beyond death. Additional anomalies include the presence of a locked door hasp secured to the crude pine coffin, an unusual measure suggesting fear that the deceased might otherwise escape confinement. This discovery prompted renewed interest in the Maro plantation case. Amateur historian Robert Jackson began collecting oral histories from elderly residents whose families had connections to the old plantation system. One account, recorded in 1979 from Eliza Davis, then aged 98, provided a disturbing family story passed down through generations. My great-grandmother worked in the Maro house as a house servant. She told my grandmother, who told my mother, who told me, about the summer when Miss Adeline and the carpenter man Solomon would meet in secret. They wasn't doing nothing wrong, my great-grandmother always said, just talking about books and ideas. Miss Adeline taught Solomon more reading, and he made beautiful things for her from wood. But Miss Charlotte, she saw something evil in it. After that night when everything went wrong, my great-grandmother was one of the servants who had to clean Miss Adeline's room. She said there was scratch marks all over the inside of the door where Miss Adeline tried to get out. They kept her locked up for days. The men took Solomon away at night. Nobody ever saw him again. When they finally brought the doctor, he gave Miss Adeline something that made her sleep. They told everyone she was going to France, but my great-grandmother saw them put her in a closed carriage with Mr. Maro. They left before dawn and came back after dark. Mr. Maro was alone when he returned. After that, nobody was allowed in the East Wing where Solomon had done all his woodwork. They closed it up completely by 1841. My great-grandmother said Miss Charlotte would walk the hallway outside the East Wing at night. Sometimes they'd hear her talking like she was having a conversation with somebody who wasn't there. The most unsettling oral account came from Harold Thompson, a descendant of Simeon Johnson, who operated the ferry mentioned in earlier records. His family story, recorded in 1981, suggested a far more disturbing fate for Solomon Graves. My great-great-grandfather ran the ferry across the Arkansas River for 30 years. He kept a private log separate from his business records. In that log, passed down through our family, there's an entry from September 1840 that describes Bernard Maro arriving at the ferry landing late at night with a wagon. 2 of his overseers were with him. They had something large wrapped in canvas in the wagon bed. They paid triple the usual fare for a crossing, with the understanding that my ancestor would immediately forget what he saw. According to the story, when they reached the middle of the river, Maro and his men dumped what was in the canvas into the water. My ancestor wrote that he heard a sound as it hit the water that haunted him for years afterward. The private log describes it as not the splash of something dead, but the panicked thrashing of something still living, bound but conscious. Before they returned to the shore, Maro told my great-great-grandfather that if he ever spoke of what happened, he would suffer the same fate. That crossing was referenced in our family as the night the ferry carried 5 over but only 4 back. My grandfather said that his grandfather would never cross that stretch of river after dark for the rest of his life. Whether this account represents fact or a story embellished over generations remains impossible to verify. The private log mentioned by Thompson was reportedly destroyed in a house fire in the 1930s, leaving only the oral tradition as evidence. In 1984, the Arkansas River underwent dredging near Little Rock to deepen the channel for commercial shipping. Among the items recovered from the riverbed was a set of rusted iron manacles attached to a heavy iron weight. The manacles showed evidence of having been locked around human wrists at the time of submersion. Metallurgical analysis dated the ironwork to the mid-19th century. The Arkansas State Museum briefly displayed these items as part of an exhibit on the dark history of the river trade, but removed them after complaints from several prominent families. The manacles were placed in storage and eventually misplaced during a facility reorganization in 1989, according to museum records. Perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence emerged in 1991 when architectural historians conducted detailed photography of the remaining Maro woodwork held in the state archives. Using new imaging techniques, they discovered that the elaborate carvings in the staircase banister, when viewed under specific lighting conditions, revealed not just the previously noted intertwined S and A initials, but an entire message worked into the decorative pattern. Dr. Elizabeth Morton's paper in the Journal of Architectural History described the finding. The carvings, when viewed as a continuous narrative rather than individual decorative elements, spell out a message that can only be fully perceived when one traces the banister from bottom to top. The message reads, "When they discover our minds have met, they will separate our bodies. If you read this, and I am gone, know that what we created here cannot be undone by them. Look for me in the work of my hands." The woodwork, created before the tragic events described in other sources, suggests Solomon Graves anticipated the reaction their relationship would provoke. It also indicates his determination to leave a lasting testament to whatever bond existed between himself and Adeline Maro. That his message remained hidden in plain sight for over 150 years speaks to both his craftsmanship and his understanding of how future generations might eventually decode what his contemporaries could not. In 2003, Ground-penetrating radar surveys of the old Maro plantation site revealed additional anomalies beneath what would have been the east wing of the house. Limited archaeological excavation uncovered the foundation stones of what appeared to be a small, hidden chamber beneath the main floor. Among the debris were fragments of paper, preserved in the dry conditions of the sealed space that appeared to be pages torn from books. Carbon dating placed the paper in the early 19th century. Handwriting analysis of marginalia visible on some fragments showed two distinct hands engaged in what appeared to be a written conversation in the margins of the text. One hand, identified as feminine based on period writing styles, had written, "Is not freedom of the mind the first and most essential liberty?" The second hand, more carefully formed as if by someone for whom writing was a more deliberate act, responded, "The mind, once enlightened, cannot again become dark." These fragments, likely representing the intellectual exchanges between Adeline and Solomon, provide the only direct evidence of the nature of their relationship. That these exchanges occurred through the margins of books suggests both caution and intimacy, a private conversation conducted through the medium of shared texts. The chamber itself, approximately 6 feet by 8 feet in dimension, contained evidence of regular use, the remnants of a small table, fragments of candle wax, and a wooden chair. Its concealed entrance, accessible only through what would have been a sliding panel in the main staircase, suggests it was designed as a hidden meeting place. Whether Bernard Maro was aware of this chamber's existence when he commissioned the East Wing construction remains unknown. By 2005, interest in the Maro grave case had waned once again. The story became little more than a footnote in academic studies of antebellum race relations, occasionally referenced in specialized publications but largely forgotten by the general public. The land where the plantation once stood was redeveloped multiple times, eventually becoming the site of a commercial warehouse complex that operates to this day. Night security guards at the facility occasionally report unusual phenomena, unexplained cold spots in specific areas, the sound of footsteps on wooden stairs where no stairs exist, and most commonly, the sensation of being watched from empty corners. Management attributes these reports to the power of suggestion and the isolated nature of night shift work. No formal investigation of these claims has been conducted. In 2012, during expansion of the warehouse facility, construction workers uncovered yet another anomaly. A small underground spring that had been deliberately capped with stone sometime in the 19th century. When the cap was removed, workers reported that the water initially ran red for several minutes before clearing. Environmental testing found no contamination or mineral content that would explain the discoloration. Local folklore quickly connected this phenomenon to the Maro Graves story, suggesting it represented the land remembering what was done there. The final piece of this disturbing historical puzzle emerged in 2017, when the Arkansas Historical Society received an anonymous donation of a small wooden box. Inside was a fragment of what appeared to be a journal page, preserved between two pieces of glass. The handwriting matched known samples of Charlotte Moreau's script. The fragment contained a single paragraph. "I hear them at night now. Both of them. His footsteps on the stairs he built, her voice calling from behind the walls. Bernard says it is my guilt speaking to me through my weakness. He has forbidden me from entering the East Wing entirely. The servants refuse to clean there. Bernard says we will close that section of the house permanently after the new year. I know what awaits me if I speak of what really happened that night, but I fear what awaits me regardless, for they have found ways to remain. Last night I heard A's voice as clearly as if she stood beside me. She said only, 'Mother, you have buried us, but we are not gone.' Forensic analysis confirmed the paper and ink dated to the 1840s. The provenance of the fragment remains unknown, as does the identity of the donor. The Arkansas Historical Society catalogued the item as part of the Maro collection, where it remains available to researchers by special request only. Today, the story of Solomon Graves and Adeline Maro represents more than just a historical curiosity or local ghost story. It stands as a testament to how power structures of the past could effectively erase certain narratives from history, how lives could be literally and figuratively buried, their stories submerged, their voices silenced. That fragments of their story have gradually emerged over nearly 2 centuries speaks to the persistence of truth, however long delayed. As Dr. Morton wrote in the conclusion of her 2001 paper on the case, the true horror of the Maro Graves story lies not in any supernatural element, but in the very human capacity for cruelty in defense of social boundaries. What happened to these 2 individuals, one a privileged white woman, the other an enslaved black man, reveals the extent to which those in power would go to maintain the racial hierarchies upon which their world was built. That we can piece together their story today owes everything to Solomon's foresight in leaving evidence within his craftsmanship, and perhaps to Adeline's persistence in ensuring her story was not entirely erased. The warehouse that now stands on the former Maro plantation grounds operates 24 hours a day. The night shift employees still occasionally report unusual experiences. One security guard who requested anonymity when interviewed in 2022 described his experience. "I've worked the night shift for 15 years. I'm not superstitious, but there's something about the northeast corner of this building. Nobody likes to go there alone after midnight. Sometimes you hear what sounds like someone working with wood, tapping, scraping. Other times, it sounds like someone walking slowly downstairs, except there are no stairs there. The weird thing is, it doesn't feel threatening. It feels like someone is still working, still creating something, like they're not finished yet." Perhaps they aren't. Perhaps the story of Solomon Graves and Adeline Maro continues to be written piece by piece, discovery by discovery, as time gradually reveals what human effort attempted to conceal. Their voices, nearly silenced by history, continue to echo faintly through the fragments they left behind, in carved wood, in hidden chambers, in the margins of books, and in the persistent memory of a place that refuses to forget what transpired there. In the archives of the Arkansas Historical Society, a small display case contains the few tangible remnants of their story: the fragment of Solomon's letter, photographs of the carved staircase detail, the wooden carving found with Adeline's probable remains, and now Charlotte's journal fragment. Few visitors ask to see these items. Fewer still understand the complete narrative they represent. But for those who piece together this historical puzzle, the most disturbing realization is not what happened to Solomon and Adeline, terrible as that was. The true horror lies in recognizing how easily their story was almost lost entirely, how effectively power and privilege can erase inconvenient truths, silence dissenting voices, and bury evidence of their own wrongdoing. It is a reminder that history is not merely what happened, but what was allowed to be remembered. And in that reminder lies perhaps the most unsettling question of all. How many other Solomons and Adelines lie forgotten beneath the weight of histories written by those who silenced them? What other stories remain buried, their participants unnamed, their injustices unacknowledged? The Maro plantation is gone, its buildings demolished, its grounds repurposed. But something of what happened there persists, in fragments of evidence, in the persistent reports of those who work there, and now in this account. Listen carefully, and perhaps you might hear what the night shift workers describe. The sound of someone still working with wood, still creating, still leaving evidence that someday might be found. The sound of history being written by those who were denied the chance to tell their own story. The most disturbing slave mystery in Little Rock history isn't a mystery at all, to those who care to look closely enough. It is a testament to the lengths to which power will go to preserve itself and to the persistence of truth despite all efforts to submerge it. And that, perhaps, is the final and most important lesson of this disturbing case. Truth, like the river into which Solomon was reportedly thrown, continues to flow. What is submerged may eventually surface. What is buried may eventually be unearthed. The silenced may, in time, find ways to speak. Just listen. In the quiet hours, in empty spaces where history waits to be acknowledged, they are still speaking.